185,000 warriors and the power of God, Black Jesus unpacks this incredible story. In the heart of ancient Jerusalem, a city encased by towering walls and consumed with fear, something extraordinary happened. A miracle so profound, it's been told across generations for nearly 3 millennia. The story of 185,000 Assyrian warriors slain by a divine hand is both inspiring and shrouded in mystery. A tale of desperation, faith, and the sheer, unfathomable power of God. For anyone facing overwhelming odds or standing before seemingly insurmountable obstacles, this story is a beacon of hope and a call to unwavering faith. The narrative of this astonishing divine intervention takes place during the reign of King Hezekiah, a righteous leader of Judah who found himself and his people under siege by the ruthless and mighty Assyrian Empire. In this moment of desperation, Hezekiah's appeal to God and the miraculous answer he received show that when human strength falters, the power of faith stands as an unyielding force. In this recounting, Black Jesus helps us peel back the layers of this story, allowing us to understand not just the historical significance, but also the spiritual depth that lies within. What can we learn from this moment of divine wrath against oppression and cruelty? What does the seemingly impossible intervention tell us about the nature of God and the impact of steadfast faith? Let's dive into the drama, suspense, and inspiration within this incredible narrative. 1. A kingdom in crisis. To grasp the magnitude of what unfolded in Jerusalem, we must picture the ancient city under siege, a fortress of stone surrounded by a relentless, unyielding force. The Assyrian Empire, the most fearsome military power of its time, had set its sights on the tiny kingdom of Judah, and now its capital, Jerusalem, was cornered with no escape. The Assyrians were not just another army, they were a symbol of terror and ruthless conquest. Known for their brutality, they subjugated nations with swift, merciless strikes, leaving behind a trail of scorched earth, broken kingdoms, and shattered spirits. By the time they encircled Jerusalem, the Assyrian forces had already crushed the fortified cities surrounding Judah, leaving Jerusalem isolated, its people vulnerable and afraid. The Assyrians had a well-earned reputation for psychological warfare. They often resorted to unspeakable tactics, not just to conquer, but to break the will of those who dared to resist. Their ranks were filled with seasoned warriors, expertly trained and well-equipped, disciplined in a way that few armies of the ancient world could rival. To the Assyrians, conquest was a form of artistry, a finely tuned machine designed to overpower, dismantle, and dominate. For Jerusalem, the threat of siege was not just a military problem, it was a question of survival. To lose meant not just defeat, but destruction, exile, or worse. Their massive army of ironclad soldiers was a reminder of this empire's raw strength, a signal that this was no mere show of force. The Assyrians had only one goal: complete subjugation. Amid this overwhelming threat stood King Hezekiah. Unlike other kings who had capitulated to Assyria, he was a man of deep, steadfast faith. Hezekiah was a leader who drew his strength not from alliances or treaties, but from his relationship with Yahweh, the God of Israel. While other kings might have sought alliances with neighboring powers or tried to buy off the Assyrians with tribute, Hezekiah chose a different path. He stood firm, refusing to bow to the false gods of neighboring nations, unwilling to sacrifice his people's faith and dignity in the face of the Assyrian threat. Hezekiah was fully aware of the human odds he was up against. His soldiers were outnumbered, his weapons inferior, and his resources stretched to the breaking point. The Assyrians were a force of nature, unstoppable, highly organized, and used to victory. But Hezekiah's faith wasn't based on the size of his army or the strength of his fortifications. Instead, he believed that Yahweh was greater than any earthly power, that God was a defender unlike any other, and that God alone could save his people. Inside Jerusalem, the situation grew increasingly bleak. The city's tall, thick walls, designed to repel invaders, offered only a temporary reprieve against a force as determined as the Assyrians. The people within the walls, families, children, elderly citizens, could feel the growing tension. The once bustling city had become a place of hushed conversations and anxious looks, the looming threat seeping into every corner of daily life. Supplies were running low. Food and water, essentials in any siege, became scarce. With each passing day, the morale of the people deteriorated, whispers of fear began to spread, and hope became a rare commodity. The Assyrians outside did everything they could to amplify the despair. They taunted the people of Jerusalem, their voices echoing over the walls as they mocked Hezekiah's faith and their belief in Yahweh. They reminded the people of Judah of the cities that had already fallen, the kingdoms that had surrendered to Assyrian power. They told the people of Jerusalem that no god of any nation had been able to withstand their might, and that Yahweh would be no different. Their words cut deep, sowing seeds of doubt in the hearts of Jerusalem's defenders. But Hezekiah did not waver. Where others might have seen these taunts as confirmation of their inevitable defeat, Hezekiah saw them as a challenge to his faith, a call to place his hope in God. He refused to surrender to despair or to compromise his belief. Instead, he encouraged his people to stand firm, to resist the voices of fear, and to trust in God's promises. Hezekiah understood that this battle was not just a physical one. It was a spiritual test of the people's faith, of their willingness to trust in God's power above all else. Hezekiah's response was unlike anything his advisors or people expected. Instead of relying on military might, he turned to prayer, laying his fears and hopes before Yahweh. He sought guidance and deliverance from the Almighty, placing his entire kingdom in God's hands. It was a profound act of trust, one that defied human logic. By choosing prayer over military strategy, Hezekiah was showing that he believed in a power far beyond what swords and shields could provide. His faith became a beacon for his people, a rallying cry for those who were losing hope. In that dark hour, Hezekiah's faith was a lifeline, a source of strength and resilience. He chose to see Jerusalem's crisis not as an end, but as an opportunity for God to reveal his power in ways that would echo through history. It was a daring choice, one that would either lead to Jerusalem's salvation or its destruction. But Hezekiah's belief was unshakable. He knew that his people's future was not in the hands of the Assyrians, but in the hands of the Almighty. Two, divine intervention. In the face of overwhelming odds, King Hezekiah turned to prayer, pouring out his heart before Yahweh. His faith was raw and unshaken, a testament to his belief in the God of Israel as a protector and a deliverer. In response, God sent a message to Hezekiah through the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah's words were as clear as they were astounding. The Assyrians would not enter Jerusalem, they would not breach its walls, and not a single arrow would darken the city's skies. God himself would defend Jerusalem. To a people living under the oppressive shadow of Assyrian power, These words must have sounded almost unbelievable. But for Hezekiah, this was the promise he had been praying for. While the people of Jerusalem prepared for the worst, the Assyrian army continued their siege, confident in their victory. Their camps sprawled across the valley below Jerusalem, tens of thousands of soldiers stationed as far as the eye could see, all poised to take the city by force. From their elevated position within the city, the people of Jerusalem could see the campfires stretching endlessly into the night, flickering reminders of the destruction that awaited them if those troops breached the city's walls. The Assyrian soldiers, unaware of the divine decree against them, likely went about their routines, preparing for an inevitable victory. But then came the night when everything changed, a night of divine intervention that defied all human explanation. The Bible tells us that an angel of the Lord descended upon the Assyrian camp. With silent and deadly precision, this heavenly warrior moved through the camp, striking down the soldiers where they lay. It was a cataclysmic act, a display of divine wrath and power that left no room for doubt. By morning, the once mighty Assyrian force had been reduced to silence. The lives of 185,000 soldiers claimed in a single, mysterious night. Imagine the awe and horror that must have gripped those who discovered the aftermath at dawn. The Assyrian encampment, once alive with the bustle of soldiers, lay eerily quiet, an entire army brought low without a single battle cry or clash of swords. The people of Jerusalem, who had braced themselves for a brutal assault, found themselves staring at an empty battlefield, the enemy vanquished by an unseen hand. For the soldiers who survived, the shock of discovering their comrades lying lifeless in the dawn light must have been overwhelming. Those who had considered themselves invincible, part of an unstoppable force, now found themselves retreating, overcome by an enemy they could not see, let alone fight. For Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem, this miraculous deliverance was nothing short of divine intervention. It was as if God had reached down and declared, "This far and no further." The people of Jerusalem, who had steeled themselves for destruction, now found themselves safe, their city untouched, their walls still standing. Hezekiah's prayers had been answered, and in a manner more dramatic and awe-inspiring than anyone could have anticipated. This event was more than just a victory for Judah. It was a declaration to the world. The God of Israel was not a mere tribal deity, but a sovereign power that even the greatest empires could not withstand. Through this single devastating act, God showed his authority over all earthly forces, delivering a powerful message to both friend and foe alike. He demonstrated that his protection of his people was not a passive promise, but an active, fearsome force that could strike down entire armies if necessary. In reflecting on this miraculous event, Black Jesus reminds us of the depth and magnitude of God's power. This was not a random act of violence or an unexplained tragedy. It was a clear and intentional display of divine authority, an assertion that God would stand against the greatest powers on earth to protect those who place their trust in him. The Assyrians, who had mocked and defied God, found themselves humbled, their ambitions shattered in a single night. And for the people of Judah, this was a moment that reaffirmed their faith, a testament to the reality that God was with them, defending them, and capable of miraculous deliverance. This act of divine intervention stands as a profound example of God's willingness to fight for those who seek refuge in him. Hezekiah's faith, met by God's power, brought salvation to a city on the brink of destruction. Through this story, We see a God who is neither distant nor indifferent, but deeply involved, ready to act on behalf of his people even when hope seems lost. This intervention was a divine act of justice and mercy, an unforgettable demonstration that God's authority knows no bounds, and his power can reach into the heart of any crisis, transforming it into a testament to his greatness. Three, Hezekiah's unyielding trust. The story of Hezekiah is one of audacious faith, a faith that dared to believe in the impossible even when all human logic pointed toward defeat. Here was a king who knew that true power didn't lie in vast armies, elaborate alliances, or carefully constructed political strategies. Instead, Hezekiah believed that real strength came from his relationship with Yahweh, the God of Israel, whose power was unmatched by any earthly empire. As the Assyrian armies amassed outside the walls of Jerusalem, their taunts were loud and cruel. They mocked Hezekiah and his people, deriding their faith, questioning their God, and spreading fear among the people of Jerusalem. In their arrogance, the Assyrian soldiers proclaimed that no God had ever withstood their might, and Yahweh would be no different. To the Assyrians, Judah's God was just one more deity to be mocked, a relic of an ancient belief that would soon crumble under their military power. They saw Hezekiah's faith as foolishness, his reliance on God as a sign of weakness. But Hezekiah did not waver. Where others might have looked to worldly solutions, he looked heavenward, rooted in an unshakable belief that God would come to their rescue. Hezekiah's faith wasn't naive optimism or desperation. It was an intentional, steadfast trust in a God who had, time and again, proven himself faithful. This trust wasn't easy or comfortable. Every instinct must have urged him to do something, anything, to bolster his kingdom's defenses, to negotiate, to seek allies, or to consider surrender. Yet Hezekiah stood firm, confident that God's protection was more powerful than any alliance, more secure than any fortress. Hezekiah's prayer was an act of courage, a bold declaration of trust in the Almighty that few could understand. He poured out his heart, not in fear, but in absolute confidence that God heard him, that his pleas were not falling on deaf ears. Hezekiah's faith teaches us that true belief is more than an abstract concept. It is a transformative power that shapes decisions, defies logic, and propels a person to stand firm even when everything around them says to give up. For Hezekiah, faith was more than just personal conviction. It was the anchor that kept his entire kingdom from collapsing under the weight of fear. He encouraged his people to trust in God's promises, to look beyond the immediate threat of destruction, and to believe in the possibility of deliverance. When the people of Jerusalem saw their king on his knees, pleading with God and placing their fate in his hands, they too found strength. Hezekiah's unwavering trust in God inspired an entire city to hope when there was no logical reason to do so. And in the end, Hezekiah's faith was rewarded in a way that defied all expectations. Without a single arrow being fired from the walls of Jerusalem, the Assyrian army was vanquished, struck down by the hand of an angel. Hezekiah's trust in God had not only saved his people, but also revealed the immense power of faith in the face of insurmountable odds. His faith moved the hand of God, becoming the catalyst for one of the most astounding miracles recorded in the Bible. This story of Hezekiah's faith stands as a reminder to us all, when we face our own Assyrians, those insurmountable challenges, overwhelming crises, or times of intense doubt. We too are called to believe in the power of God to do the impossible. Hezekiah's unyielding trust assures us that faith is more than passive belief. It is an active force that sustains, protects, and, ultimately, saves. His example echoes through the ages, telling us that faith, even in the darkest moments, truly can move mountains. Fourth, God's sovereignty, judgment, and protection. The miraculous deliverance of Jerusalem from the Assyrian army is more than a tale of divine intervention. It is a profound revelation of God's character. In a world where might often dictates outcomes, this story turns our understanding of power and justice upside down. We are reminded that God's sovereignty transcends human strength, that He is not bound by the limits of human armies or empires. God's response to Hezekiah's prayer shows that His power is not passive or indifferent, but actively involved in the lives of His people. This story is also a sobering reminder of divine judgment. The Assyrians were notorious for their cruelty, their habit of desecrating temples, and their utter disregard for the sanctity of human life. By striking down 185,000 soldiers, God was not merely defending His people. He was delivering justice for countless others who had suffered under the Assyrian reign of terror. This act of divine intervention revealed a God who does not ignore the cries of the oppressed or turn a blind eye to injustice. God's power in this story is not random or vengeful. It is purposeful, a deliberate act against the brutality that the Assyrian Empire represented. Yet, within this moment of judgment, we also see a profound display of God's protective love. For the Israelites, this was more than a military victory. It was a reaffirmation that their God was with them, that He had not abandoned them, even when all seemed lost. In one decisive night, God demonstrated His ability to protect His people in ways that defied human understanding, underscoring that His relationship with them was one of both power and mercy. This divine intervention was not just a moment of salvation for Jerusalem. It was a statement to the entire world. The God of Israel was not just another deity among the pantheon of gods worshipped in ancient times. He was, and is, the sovereign Lord of all, capable of changing the course of history with a single act. This story assures us that God's justice is real, His protection is sure, and His love is unwavering. For the people of Judah, and for believers today, this story is a testament to a God who hears, who acts, and who delivers. It reminds us that no matter the size or strength of the forces against us, we are never alone. In the face of overwhelming odds, when human strength is inadequate, God's power remains unmatched. This moment in biblical history declares that faith in such a God is not misplaced. It is, in fact, the only unshakable foundation.